Hello, planet, and Happy New Year! Welcome to 2025. I'm Tim, native speaker of English from the United States, English teacher since 2005, polyglot, world traveler, writer, and podcaster, and I wish every one of you, new listeners and old, health, happiness, and success in 2025 and beyond. I also want to wish you success specifically in your English studies. I hope that they are enjoyable, that you get chances to use your English, and that you make real progress in whatever part of the language that you're working on, and that you pass IELTS or whatever test you might be preparing for. I also will, of course, be overjoyed if you make me a part of your success in English language studies. This week's episode is episode number 92, which is an absolutely crazy big number. When you've written and recorded this many episodes, you start to realize that you could have done certain episodes a little bit better, that there was some fact or detail that would have made the episode even better. And so I actually made a list of things that I wanted to say, or in some cases didn't have time to say, in previous episodes, and I found things that I wanted to say but didn't. Let's start with episode 91 from just last week, which was titled Christmas 2024 in Paris and Beyond. In part of that episode, I talked about my visit to the Louvre. I said that it was actually quite hard for us to exit this very famous museum. We went down some steps and found ourselves in a very, very large underground shopping mall. What I saw there shocked me. I saw a McDonald's in the basement of the Louvre. That's weird. Speaking of forgetting, I forget whether I mentioned this McDonald's in last week's episode, but one thing I know I did not talk about, and it's kind of interesting, is the fact that in France and Belgium, there is a competitor for McDonald's which is called Quick. It isn't a direct copy of McDonald's, but the menu items and price points are pretty much the same. Hamburgers, fries, cola, fish sandwiches, and so on that aren't actually all that cheap, honestly. Although I do remember the food in Quick being significantly better than it is in McDonald's. Like McDonald's, Quick has some prestige locations. One was in the southeastern port city, Marseille, at the bottom of the Canebière, which is the city's most famous boulevard. The Canebière is pretty wide and now has a tramway down the center of it, and shops on either side. And at the bottom of this famous boulevard, you can find the Old Port, which, in spite of its name, is still very much in use today and is full of private sailboats and also a few cruise ships. And way back in 2006, when I was there, if you got to the bottom of the Canebière and turned left, you'd find one of these Quick restaurants. So, let's move to the second thing I forgot. This one is from episode 83. Titled Knowing Vocabulary Deeply. In that episode, I talked about what it means when you really know a word or expression, which means its pronunciations, including chewing gum forms, its different forms, for example, plurals or past tense forms, its spelling, its different meanings, so usually words have several meanings and you need to know not just one, also its metaphorical meanings, and, well, I could continue with a lot of things that you would need to know to be able to say that you really and truly understand a word or know it. But I won't continue with that list because there are a lot more aspects of a word that you need to know if you want to say that you really know it. And if that really interests you, if you really want to know all of these aspects, you can just listen to episode 83. So, the thing that I actually forgot from episode 83 was the perhaps obvious point that it's unrealistic to expect to learn all of the many aspects of a word in one meeting or encounter with that word, even if you sit down, open a dictionary, and focus on just that one word. A better way of thinking about learning all of these details or aspects of a word is that you learn them all through multiple meetings with it. In the first meeting or encounter, you might just learn the pronunciation and meaning, or even just one of those. So you get the word itself, its pronunciation, into your memory, and then the next time you get an additional meaning, or a nuance of a meaning, or a chewing gum pronunciation, or a new collocation, and so on. There is, hopefully, an end to this process, but in reality, if you looked at most words that a B2 student thinks that they know well, there are some things that are missing. In other words, your knowledge probably is only partial. If you want to get closer to the end of this process, where the end is learning a word, knowing it completely, then you can use my episodes on the NGSL. You can listen to episodes 2, 11, 62, and honestly, many others. Just look in Spotify or Apple Podcasts and search for NGSL, or do that on Google. Master English with Tim, NGSL. Okay, now for the third thing I forgot. This one from way, way back in episode 6 in 2023. Episode 6 was about the many different meanings of the common and commonly misunderstood verb get. There was one meaning of get that I did talk about where you combine get with a preposition of motion like up or on or through or into. Let me give you an example sentence for each of those combinations of get plus preposition. So, 4 examples. 1. I slept badly, so I got up late this morning. 2. What time did you get on the bus? 3. David got into the car, closed the door, and drove away. 4th and last. Where are you? Your plane landed an hour ago. We're still getting through the security check. So, in all of these examples, there is a person who moves. Someone gets up, gets on a bus, or gets through security. And the people in each of these examples don't move a different person or thing, but instead themselves. But there's also another possibility with get, where the person in the sentence who moves a different person or thing. 5 examples. 1. Get out your pencils, please, and write your names on the first page of the test. 2. This special pass gets you into every museum in the city for a whole year. 3. Her dad is really rich, and he gets her out of trouble every time she makes a mistake. 4. The gasoline that we bought is enough to get us to Chicago. 5th and last. The first time you encounter a word, you try to get its pronunciation and spelling into your memory. Now, this use of get is not super common, and you also can't just use it easily with any preposition, with any meaning, but it is worth mentioning, and you probably will hear or see it sometime in the future. If you want to hear about a dozen meanings of get, and also 131 example sentences to help you remember these meanings, then listen to episode 6. Okay, it's time for forgotten thing number 4. Back in episode 20, also from 2023, I talked about 6 synonyms of the very common verb become. Those synonyms were turn, go, grow, wax, and fall. Of these 6 verbs, the one that interests us today is go. I said in episode 20 that go is a verb that we use to talk about changes that have 2 characteristics. It must have both of them. First, the changes are sudden or even instant, like that. And second, they are dramatic and often unexpected. Here are 2 examples. So again, sudden or instant, and dramatic or unexpected. 1. Her face went as white as a sheet when she heard the news. Second and last, we were watching a movie at the cinema last night and suddenly the screen just went black. So, this meaning of go is used especially when saying that someone became crazy. In fact, we don't say become crazy, we say go crazy, because that's usually something sudden and always dramatic. The verb go in this meaning combines with some other very informal ways of saying crazy. People from the United States also say go nuts, go bonkers, and go haywire. Go haywire. People from Great Britain, and I think also Australia and New Zealand, also say to go spare. That's S-P-A-R-E, go spare, which means more like an angry kind of crazy. For example, she went spare when she found out I had crashed her car. So, let's go through all those again. We have go nuts, go bonkers, and go haywire. That's US. And Britain and New Zealand and Australia, you can say go spare. So, another expression with go that does not exactly describe the same thing as going crazy, but which does describe a dramatic and unexpected change in someone's behavior and way of thinking, is to go native, which is the concrete thing I'd forgotten about from that episode. So, a native is, of course, a person who is from a particular place. So, I'm from the United States, so you could say I'm a U.S. native. Or maybe you're from, I don't know, Chengdu, which means you are a native of Chengdu. Now, when a person who has gone to another country goes native, it means that that traveler completely left behind their own traditions, ways of thinking, customs, food, drink, music, and even language, and begins acting in exactly the same way as the local people. An extreme example of a person who went native is a guy named Gonzalo Guerrero, who was born in Spain at the end of the 15th century and joined one of Spain's expeditions to Central America. In 1511, his ship wrecked near Jamaica. He and 14 other men with him made a new, simple boat and ended up in the Maya region of Mexico. Some of the men were sacrificed or killed in a religious ceremony by the Maya, but Guerrero himself was allowed to live, and they made him into a slave. However, the Maya soon understood that this man was a talented soldier, and he married a native woman, left behind his Catholic religion, and adopted Maya polytheism. The Spanish heard about this man and invited him to come back to Spain and to Spanish life, but he refused. He said no, and he even fought as a soldier against Spanish conquistadors, causing them a lot of trouble because he knew their language and their way of fighting. So yes, Gonzalo Guerrero really went native. And actually, there is a state now in the south of Mexico, in the city of Acapulco, which you probably have heard of. It's famous for vacations. The state that Acapulco is located in is called Guerrero, and there are also countless statues of this man Guerrero all over Guatemala. So if you really like crazy biographies like this, then you can hear another one, this time about a man from India who fought against the British Empire in episode 20. Another thing that I forgot to include in my episodes, the fifth thing, was for episode 34, Deep Dive into Proto-Indo-European Roots. In that episode, I talked about the fact that languages as different as English, Greek, Belarusian, and even Hindi all developed from a single language first spoken about 6,500 years ago in what is now Ukraine. We can find similar words with similar meanings in all of these languages. We can also find groups of English words that all share just one Indo-European root, or word part that has a specific meaning. So one root, one meaning. An example of this phenomenon is words that start with the letters BL or PL and refer to things that are either round or have air in them, or both. For example, ball and apple are both round. Also, a bulge, that's B-U-L-G-E, bulge, is a kind of small hill in a piece of material. For example, if you have a big wallet in your jeans pocket, and people can see how big the wallet is in your pocket, then that little kind of hill that your wallet makes is called a bulge. The verb blow, B-L-O-W, of course, refers to the movement of air. For example, the wind blows on a cold day. A billow, B-I-L-L-O-W, is a pump that you use to blow air onto a fire to make that fire burn hotter. So again, something about air. And here's the point that I forgot in episode 34. We can also include the word pillow. P-I-L-L-O-W, pillow. A pillow is something that you can find on a person's bed. It's the soft, kind of round object that you put your head on when it's time to sleep. Come to think of it, a pillow looks a bit like a fat belly, which is another word for a person's stomach. Now, the sixth thing that I forgot, and that should have been in episode 52, is where I talked about should, have to, and must, and the differences between these three verbs. I gave a solid explanation of these three verbs' meanings, but then I found an even better way to think about must. When you tell someone that they must do something, you are warning them that there could be serious negative results or consequences of not doing what you're telling them to. For example, if you tell a person that they must have a passport to travel to Canada, then you are warning them that without the passport, they will not cross the border and instead will have to come home. If you tell someone that they must not put diesel into a gasoline engine, you're warning the person that their engine will be ruined if they don't follow your advice. Another thing about must that I did not mention in that episode is that must can also be used as a noun that refers to something a person must do. For example, knowing English is a must if you want to work in a U.S. company. Getting all of your vaccines is a must if you want to travel to tropical parts of the world. All right, forgotten thing number 7. So, not long ago, in episode 89, Words with Impact, I talked about how to use the word utter, U-T-T-E-R, utter, to underline and strengthen the meanings of words that are already strong. Notice that the word utter is kind of like the word outer, which is unusual and extreme. Living in wealth, for example, is of course nice, but living in utter opulence is so much better that it's just amazing. Fear is of course bad, but utter terror is the absolute worst. For more examples, just listen to episode 89. So, utter is the word that you use with strong nouns, but we also have a very similar word that we use with very strong adjectives. That word is utterly, so U-T-T-E-R-L-Y, utterly. For example, a person might be afraid. Worse, they could be terrified, but the very worst is being utterly terrified. Here are 11 combinations for you. Remember that I start with the base meaning, for example, afraid, then say a stronger word, for example, terrified, and then add utterly to get utterly terrified, which gives it really maximum impact. Some of the strong words will be new for you. Let's start. Number 1, angry, enraged, utterly enraged. 2, disgusted, revolted, utterly revolted. 3, crazy, insane, utterly insane. 4, surprising, amazing, utterly amazing. 5, uncaring, indifferent, utterly indifferent. 6, hopeless, completely hopeless, utterly hopeless. 7, bad, horrifying, utterly horrifying. 8, excited, thrilled, utterly thrilled. 9, forgotten, completely forgotten, utterly forgotten. 10, immoral, despicable, utterly despicable. 11th and last, funny, hilarious, utterly hilarious. Okay, the 8th and last thing that I forgot to talk about was something cute and funny that I saw on my trip to France. I was traveling in the TGV, that's the French high-speed train, and there was a small kid there, only 3 years old, who was on a train for the first time. He was looking out the window and also playing with a button on his chair that you could use to make the armrest go up or down. The button was made of shiny metal, and instead of pushing it, he turned it and explained to the people around him that turning the button made the train go faster. I thought that was just utterly hilarious. Now, before we finish, though, I need to ask you something. Can I please have your help? This podcast can only succeed when people listen to it, and so I am asking you to please share this podcast with your friends and family and colleagues. If you have a favorite episode, then maybe share that one with them specifically. It really helps me a lot when I get new listeners. Okay, that's all for this week. Thanks a million for listening. Happy New Year once again, and see you next Monday.